Sony finally revealed the PlayStation 5's controller, the DualSense, and boy oh boy is she a beaut. But let's not forget about Microsoft and their Xbox Series X controller. While it's not as flashy as the DualSense, it's an incredible controller in its own right. Now that we've seen both the Xbox Series X controller and the PS5 controller, we decided it's time to compare them to each other and see which one has the edge. Sony and Microsoft went in completely different directions with the controllers for their next-gen consoles. But only one of these controllers can come out on top. So let's start with the PlayStation 5 and Sony's recently unveiled DualSense controller. The DualSense is bulkier than the DualShock 4, but other than that, it's quite similar. Well, besides the colors. Its two-tone color scheme is something completely new, and honestly, we're kinda big fans of it. All the buttons are pretty much in the exact same place and positioned the same way as they were in the DualShock 4, but the DualSense has a much more rounded and ergonomic design that should be comfier to hold for extended gameplay sessions. The light bar now sits on the sides of the touchpad instead of at the top of the controller. Yeah, the touchpad is still going to be a part of the controller, so it's backwards compatible with PS4 games. We're not big fans of the touchpad, but we have to admit that it makes sense to keep it. It makes dual sense. According to Sony, despite its bulkier design, the controller feels smaller than it looks, but we'll only be able to tell that once we have our hands on it. Sony's also doing their best to make sure the DualSense's battery life is as good as it could be, but having a light bar could definitely drain that battery significantly. We just hope it's better than the DualShock 4's battery life, which was pretty bad. It felt like we were changing controllers every few hours. In terms of new features, the controller will support haptic feedback, which will add a variety of powerful sensations we'll feel when we play. Sony mentioned the slow grittiness of driving a car through mud as something we'll feel through haptic feedback. The controller will also have adaptive triggers in the L2 and R2 buttons, which will allow us to truly feel the tension of our actions. Sony highlighted drawing a bow to shoot an arrow as something we'll be able to feel through adaptive triggers. The share button has been replaced with the create button on the DualSense that'll also be used to take pictures and record video clips among other things that Sony has yet to share with us, but they will in the coming months. The controller also comes with a built-in microphone that could be used to communicate with teammates, although for longer sessions a headset is definitely recommended. While it wasn't clear in the pictures, it's confirmed that the DualSense will come with a 3.5mm headphone jack at the bottom so you could plug in a headset or pair of headphones to play, just like with the DualShock 4, which was a low-key amazing quality of life improvement. It also has a rechargeable lithium-ion battery just like its predecessor, but with USB-C support instead of micro USB, which is a huge step up. Now let's talk about Microsoft's Xbox Series X and the console's controller. The design of the Series X isn't vastly different to the Xbox One controller, which isn't a bad thing at all, honestly. All the buttons are in the same place, but they finally added another one, the share button, something that the PS4 had that the Xbox didn't. It was a must for the Xbox Series X, and Microsoft made sure to include it, even if they were just a little bit late to the party. The controller has more rounded bumpers as well as slightly reduced and rounded parts around the triggers, and even sculpted grips that should make it comfier to hold no matter what your hand shape is. There's also a tactile dot pattern on triggers and bumpers to improve grip. Microsoft really focused on making their controller as ergonomic as possible for as many people as possible. The most interesting change to the Xbox Series X controller is the D-pad. It's a mix of both a cardinal D-pad with 4 distinct directional buttons like the Xbox One controller had, and the circular D-pad on the Xbox One Elite controller. This D-pad is supposed to give gamers the best of both worlds so they could get those precise movements as well as diagonal movements. It's honestly the best D-pad we've ever seen on paper, so we can't wait to see how it feels to use. Another main focus of Microsoft was on improving the latency of the Xbox Series X controller. They confirmed that the controller will have less latency because Microsoft is focused on making it compatible with Project X Cloud. They're still in development cloud-based gaming service, similar to Google Stadia. For that reason, their controller needs as little latency as possible so it could connect to many mobile devices easily and efficiently. Less latency also means less input lag in the controller, which could improve your performance in first-person shooters and other games that require quick reaction time. The major gripe with the Xbox Series X controller is that it still uses AA batteries and will not have a built-in rechargeable lithium-ion battery. Now, Microsoft said that there will be an option to buy a rechargeable battery pack for the controller, but let's be honest, that's kind of lame. Who still uses AA batteries for controllers in 2020? The good news is that the controller will come with a USB-C port to plug it in and play with. And if you get one of those rechargeable battery packs, you can also charge the controller through the USB-C port. It's even still got a 3.5mm headphone jack, so at least it's not all bad. Now that we've let you in on everything there is to know about these two controllers, let's compare and contrast them to see which one is going to be the king of the next generation. Right off the bat, it's clear that Microsoft and Sony went in completely different directions with their controllers. Microsoft focused on improving a core controller design that's worked so well for them over the past decade. Pretty much since the Xbox 360, really. They made some slight improvements to the controller, but nothing drastic. Sony, on the other hand, swung for the fences. They focused much more on immersion with the DualSense. As we learned at GDC in mid-March, Sony is putting a lot of emphasis on their Tempest 3D audio tech engine that's so immersive it's supposed to make us feel like we're in the game. Because of this, they've made sure the DualSense had the best haptic feedback and adaptive triggers on a controller, so Sony could take that immersion to the next level. Another major difference is the rechargeable battery, or lack thereof in the Xbox Series X controller's case. Like we mentioned earlier, the Xbox Series X controller is going to use AA batteries. Who still uses Oh, yeah, right, we already made that joke. Anyway, yeah, the Xbox Series X controller still uses AA batteries, but the DualSense will have a rechargeable lithium-ion battery. Sure, you could buy a rechargeable battery pack for the Xbox Series X, but it's built right into the DualSense, which is a huge win for Sony. The final major difference between these controllers is that the DualSense has a built-in microphone, while the Xbox Series X controller doesn't. Now, this isn't a feature anyone really asked for on a controller, but we have a feeling that it could become an awesome quality of life improvement. It's ideal for those times when you can't find your headphones or just don't feel like messing your hair up with one of those heavy headsets. What? Headset hair is a legitimate problem, alright? It is. As for the more subtle differences, we'll start with the D-pad, an area Microsoft definitely has Sony beat. The cardinal circular D-pad hybrid on the Xbox Series X controller looks amazing and is a clear step above the DualSense's more traditional cardinal D-pad. It should feel great on our thumbs and allow us to move in all the right directions with ease, which could really help with side-scrollers and other games that work better with a D-pad than a thumbstick. While this may come as a surprise to nobody, the DualSense comes with a touchpad while the Xbox Series X controller doesn't. As we already mentioned, we're not the biggest fans of the touchpad, but it's still a clear difference between the two controllers and is mainly there for backwards compatibility more than anything else. It's not much of a big deal, and once again, Microsoft went for a more traditional approach. Another surprise to absolutely nobody is the thumbstick placement. The Xbox Series X controller has Microsoft's typical offset thumbstick setup, and the DualSense has Sony's typical side-by-side setup. Both controllers are keeping the same thumbstick placement they've had from day one, and while we prefer the Xbox's offset thumbsticks, we've never had a problem using PlayStation controllers. The color scheme is also different between the controllers. Microsoft went for a traditional all-black look with colored buttons, while Sony has a more flashy white and black two-tone color scheme with the light bar adding the biggest splash of color. The DualSense has a bit more of a futuristic look, while the Xbox Series X controller is staying true to what's worked for Microsoft. As you can see, the PlayStation and Xbox controllers are more similar than ever before, but they could have been even better. For the Series X, it would have been great to have a built-in rechargeable lithium-ion battery, instead of even more AA batteries. Maybe a future Xbox Series X Elite controller will have a built-in rechargeable battery. Whatever the case may be, they are way behind Sony when it comes to rechargeable batteries. Sony hasn't used AA battery-powered wireless controllers since the PS3 was released way back in 2006. But Microsoft is still using them today. Having to buy a rechargeable battery pack separately just means gamers have to spend more money to get the features that they want. In fact, we'd go as far to say that a rechargeable battery would have pretty much made it the perfect controller. And speaking of perfect controllers, the DualSense is as close to a perfect controller as we've ever seen. But we would have loved to have seen a D-pad like on the Xbox Series X controller on the PS5. Maybe a PS5 Pro controller will have the cardinal circular D-pad hybrid we saw on the Xbox Series X controller. We sure hope so, because the D-pad on the DualSense looks a bit dated now, especially compared to the Xbox Series X controller. Luckily, games typically use thumbsticks and not the D-pad, so it's not a big issue. It would have also been great if the touchpad was removable, so we only needed to use it when playing PS4 games, but hopefully PS5 games will make better use of it than its predecessor did. It was just a glorified select button on the PS4. We could talk about which controller is better than the other until we're blue in the face, but what we know for sure is that both of these controllers are going to be absolutely amazing to game with, whether you go with the Xbox Series X or the PS5. While the Xbox Series X controller will most likely feel better to hold and have a better grip, the DualSense has more features and seems to be the more impressive of the two. While Microsoft might have Sony beat in terms of raw power in their Xbox Series X, Sony fired back with their DualSense controller. They may have won this battle, but whoever wins the war remains to be seen. And that is everything we know about the DualSense and Xbox Series X controller. It looks like the PS5 has the better controller, but what do you think? Let us know in the comments section way down below, and don't forget to subscribe to The Gamer for more gaming videos. As always, thanks a lot for watching.